First of all, I would like to wish our audience and our viewing audience Happy New Year. And I am so excited that our children are heading back to school tomorrow. And with that said, I ask Ms. Bowers to call the roll.
Ms. Cherry? Mr. Harper? Ms. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Kilgore?
Here.
Ms. Mugler?
Here.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Here.
Mr. Samuels?
Present. On the agenda, we have item 1.02, which is the invocation and pledge of allegiance. At this time, I turn the agenda or the meeting over to our school board rep, Mr. Xavier Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to agree with your opening statements I'm glad that we're going back to school tomorrow as well. Glad that we had the snow days, but I'm glad to go back. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce to the board members and our audience today, Mr. Mason Nowak. He is a first grade student from Booker Elementary, and as it is our custom, we like to have our students come to the school board meeting to introduce the invocation and to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this time, if everyone would please stand as Mason leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Cats are furry. Cats are small, cats are hardly big at all. Cats can purr, and cats meow. Do you like cats? I sure do.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Mason. And since your poem was about cats, do you have a cat by chance?
Yes.
You do? What's he or she's name?
Moo.
Moo? Is it female or male?
Girl.
Girl? Okay. Awesome. Well, like Mr. Samuels mentioned, we had some snow days. What did you do during the snow days we had?
I played in the snow, stayed home with my dad, and I had a sleepover with my nana and papa.
Oh, that's nice. Well, are there any people today in the audience that you would like to recognize?
Mm-hmm.
You can go ahead.
Who's here with you?
Savannah is my cousin. P, Nanny, Nana, my mom, Dad, Gigi, and my nana and papa.
Awesome. Anybody anyone here from your school today?
Miss Blaha and Miss Sear.
Thank you. Can you all stand to be recognized, please? Thank you. Mason, thank you for coming today. I know that school was closed, and I know that since we have a school board meeting, it might make you think, why are we going? But thank you for coming, and we truly enjoyed your poem today. I hope you have a great day at school tomorrow and for the rest of the school year. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions from board members for Mr. Mason? Okay. Well, I have something in common with you, Mr. Mason. You come back to the podium. My son, James, who attends Hunter B. Andrews, Miss Sear was his assistant principal. And she did a fantastic job as the assistant principal at Hunter B. Andrews, and I know that she's also doing a fantastic job at Booker, so you're in good hands at Booker Elementary.
Okay.
Mr. Samuels, can I say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
I shared with Mason that when I was in elementary school, I went to Booker. And I remember that his first grade teacher, it was Nettleman at the time, correct? And I found out that you're now married. Congratulations. But Miss Sear was also a Booker Bulldog when she went to elementary school. So you have a lot of Booker family here with you today. So once again, congratulations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Good job, Mason. At this time, we have on the agenda item 1.03, which is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the agenda, which has been slightly modified for this occasion because of the snow.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Ms. Henry and seconded by Mr. Kilgore that we adopt the agenda, which is slightly modified due to the weather. And is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye. Next item is item 2, which is the consent agenda, item 2.01, personal report number 18-01, which represent the first personal report of the new year. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Mugler and seconded by Mr. Kilgore that we adopt the consent agenda, which is personal report number 18-01. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye. Next on the agenda is item 3, which is the superintendent and staff report. At this time, I turn the meeting over to our superintendent, Dr. Jeffrey Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the school board. At this time, I would invite and ask Dr. John Caggiano to come forward, who will introduce this particular presentation and really talk about the great work that we have going on in the terms of early literacy. And he will also share others who will be presenting and a part of this particular presentation. Dr. Caggiano.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Good evening, Chairman Samuels, members of the board, Dr. Smith. Purpose of this presentation tonight really is to provide the board an update regarding some of the work surrounding our focus on early literacy. Joining me for this presentation, Dr. Kelly Cito, our curriculum leader for language arts, Mr. Bruce Myers, Executive Director of Smart Beginnings, Virginia Peninsula, and one of his counterparts, Beverly Becker, Early Education Resource Coordinator, also from Smart Beginnings, Virginia Peninsula. As you all will recall, when Dr. Smith arrived approximately 2.5 years ago, one of the first things he did was embark on a Look, Listen, and Learn tour. And during that time, I think he had the opportunity to meet with approximately 1,100 stakeholders, both internal and external. And one of the themes that emerged among several had to do with early literacy and really the need in our division for a continued focus around early literacy. Some of those initial conversations with Dr. Smith, it was really challenging the team to think beyond kind of K-12. And so what he said was, we really want to see a focus on birth to post-secondary when it comes to literacy. And that led us in a few different directions, uncovering some things we hadn't really scratched before. Before you see some data that going back a couple of years ago, we'd always thought that, pre-K had made a difference, and then working with Dr. Cooper's office, really wanted to get into the data. And talking about school readiness, and as you can see, I'm setting up Mr. Myers as he comes forward in just a few minutes. But when parents come to school to register a child, they fill out a form, a number of forms, and one of those on the field speaks to, did your child have a pre-K experience or not? And so when we look at the kindergarten class of 15-16, 90% of those boys and girls had a pre-K experience. And so each year we enroll approximately 1,400 kindergarten students. What this data here represents 1,288 students, which is 90% of that kindergarten class. I say 90% because 10% we didn't get that information from parents. What Dr. Cooper's office did was she took that information and really divided it into two slices of the pie. But before that, you'll see the breakdown. So what the red slice of the pie represents 21% of those students, 21% of the 1,288 who did not have a pre-K experience, and the remaining students, the 79%, did. And then the rest of the colors you represent depict where those students had a pre-K experience. So for example, the Virginia Preschool Initiative, 44% of that group of students participated in what is known as VPI. But then we took that data and we took a look from a school readiness standpoint, foundational literacy skills, and we administer throughout Virginia the PALS assessment, the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening Assessment, in the fall and the spring in kindergarten. And it was interesting, some revelations regarding the data. When you look at those boys and girls who did not have a pre-K experience, 1 in 4 of those students did not meet the benchmark in reference to foundational literacy skills on that PALS assessment, versus 94% of the boys and girls who had a pre-K experience meeting that benchmark. It also led us, again, I mentioned Dr. Smith with the challenge of looking beyond K-12. Ms. Joanne Drew is here today. She's the principal of Moton Early Childhood Center. She also oversees our early childhood education in Hampton City Schools. We then, Dr. Smith, in ongoing partnership with Smart Beginnings Virginia Peninsula for some years now, began to engage in some conversations about, well, let's talk not only pre-K, but prior to pre-K. And so at this time, I'd ask Mr. Myers to come forward to talk a little bit about the goal of Smart Beginnings and some of the partnerships we've had with not only Hampton City Schools and Smart Beginnings, but Newport News Public Schools as well.
This is the advancement. Oh. Thank you all very much. I want to thank Dr. Smith, Dr. Caggiano, and the school board for allowing Smart Beginnings to talk to you tonight about a kindergarten readiness document to be shown you in a minute that was developed by both the Hampton and Newport News school systems. On a personal note, I have to say that I've been executive director now of Smart Beginnings for going on 7 years, and our mission and vision is shown up there is to get kids healthy and prepared for kindergarten. The prepared or ready was always in question in terms of what does a ready child look like. And there was always frustration with me because it could not be quantified, and when we asked school systems, and not only here but elsewhere, you get various different answers. So we hope tonight that this is the first step in trying to get some continuity to that, and I appreciate that. I want to briefly just introduce you to Smart Beginnings. It's a 20-minute presentation normally, but I've got it down to about 2 or 3 minutes here for the interest of time, because we are a little bit different organization as we are, and I'm the executive director of this nonprofit. It is a nonprofit, which is the local early childhood support and system building organization that covers Hampton, Newport News, and the surrounding region. Smart Beginnings' vision, as you see there, is that all children will start school prepared and healthy so they have an opportunity to succeed in school as well as in life. And the document that's going to be presented to you shortly will be a key component. It's simple, but is a key component in helping to achieve this objective. Traditionally, public school systems have focused on the elementary to high school years. I want to commend you all and the administration for recognizing the critical role that early childhood experiences plays in the future success of our children. Research is clear that a child's development begins from conception, and that experiences they encounter play a major role in their social, economic, and cognitive development. Early childhood experiences affect the development of brain architecture, which provide the foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. The first years are a very busy, critical time for the development of brain circuits. The brain has the most capacity for change during this period of time, which means it is a period of both great opportunity but also great vulnerability. It is easier and less costly to form strong brain circuits during the early years than it is to fix them later in the outer years. Again, I applaud the school system for comprehending that learning does not begin on the first day of school. And in order to achieve your 2020 goals, which have been set out so brilliantly by you all and by Dr. Smith, the school system needs to go beyond their traditional boundaries to partner with the early childhood world. This was the rationale behind the creation of the document you're going to see in a minute, which will assist families in getting their children ready for kindergarten. When the skills on this document are achieved, it will be instrumental in leading to a child's betterment and success, both educationally and professionally. At that point, the quality of life of those living and working in our communities will be greatly improved. So that's what we do at Smart Beginnings. We try to work with the system to bring it focused on getting children prepared for kindergarten so that you can take it from there. And we know what happens if they're not. It causes all sorts of problems. To talk about the document itself, I'm going to introduce Beverly Becker, who is our Educational Resource Coordinator. We also have Tracy Snyder, who's here tonight from Smart Beginnings, and she's our media and outreach person. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it over to Beverly.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. Again, I also am very pleased to be here this evening. I'm thankful for your vision, Dr. Smith. I have been in the education field for many years myself and have transitioned into this position with Smart Beginnings, and I see a huge link in what you're trying to do within your community. I commend you for that. I would invite you to look in your packets, and you'll see the card that we're going to be talking through very quickly. There's two sides. I'm going to talk about the back first, which is the navy blue side. Certainly that is just an opportunity for families to get acquainted with our agency and to have a better understanding of the design of this document and the importance. And then there's also community resources if indeed the families see that they're going through the checklist on the front and there is some kind of question that they need answered, or they feel as if they need some support. Those options are there on the back to support them. I want to spend the majority of my time on the front side, or the green side of the card rather, and I want to talk to you about the design of this. First and foremost, we had many, many years of educational experience sitting at the table as we were designing this. So you thought, well, this is going to be easy, right? It was not. And I'm actually not surprised by that. Everyone's educational background, everyone's philosophy plays a part into what they believe readiness looks like and sounds like. So it can be really hard as a community to come together to determine what it is that we're going to call readiness. And I'm very, very, very proud to say that we have achieved that with this document. First of all, you'll notice at the very top it says 3 through 5. You don't become 4 and you don't become 5 and all of a sudden you can just gloriously do all these things on this list. That we need to give children room to grow on their time and in their measure. And so you'll notice that we put a wide range for families. The other thing that I'd like you to know is we were very, very intentional about the wording of the document. We wanted it to be approachable for families. We wanted you all as school board members, teachers, administrators, business leaders, community members to be able to pick this up and talk with families. We all have to come together. It takes a village. We want you to be comfortable and confident talking with parents about what it is they need to do to ensure success for their child as they enter kindergarten. When you look at the specific categories, we also were very intentional about where we place the different categories. You notice that math and literacy are at the bottom. That is very intentional, and let me talk you through that. First and foremost, we have social emotional skills. We all get angry, right? From time to time, we get angry, but we as adults know how to self-regulate and to manage and to get along with others, to handle stressful situations. We can't expect that children come into classrooms ready to share and understand what's happening in their little worlds and how to learn. We have to teach children how to approach the classroom and how to learn. And these social emotional skills that we've put on here will help families understand the needs and the necessary things that will happen in order to make their children ready. The next thing you'll see on here is not necessarily just literacy, but oral language skills. We need children to have vocabulary. We need children to be able to speak and have conversations. We live in the age of technology, and that does not give the children opportunity to have communication and to have back and forth conversation with families. They're busy, they're working, they're trying to put food on the table. But these, we want to put them in front of parents to let them know how very important these skills are, and for childcare providers and schools to know. The next, you'll see fine and gross motor. If children know the letter A, and they know it says ah, and they want to write apple, and they get into kindergarten, and they don't have the motor skills in order to use the tools like scissors and crayons and markers, then they're not going to be able to write using that letter A and that ah. And so as parents, I'm a parent myself, I'll be honest, I go to the things that are concrete: letters, shapes, numbers, colors. I can do those, I'm good to go. but there's so many other things that make a well-rounded child ready for school. And that's what I'm just so very proud of this document and what we've done here today. So thank you, Dr. Caggiano. Thank you for Joanne Drew. We just appreciate y'all so much. Thank you, Ann Bain, for coming alongside us as an agency. And I look forward to doing many more projects with you all as you are going towards that 2020 vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beverly. And again, a big shout out to Smart Beginnings and Mr. Myers for his leadership. And as Beverly mentioned, also Ann for bringing all of the parties together. And so very productive. This was in draft form last year, what you see in front of you. And this was actually used as beginning with the end in mind as we planned and wrote the curriculum. Ms. Drew had a couple of teachers last year for the Rising Pre-K Summer Program. And so those two teachers sat down with a blank slate in this document here, and that's what that curriculum was drafted from. Transitioning and taking a little bit deeper dive, we've talked a little bit before in the state of Virginia, one of the unintended consequences about the year of accountability and SOL testing has been a laser focus in 3 through 5, and with those testing grades. And in Hampton, we are saying that putting the eggs in the early literacy basket, closing gaps before students reach later years of the elementary, as depicted here in this quote. Historically, intervention programs have not provided services to students until documented failure occurred, and so getting out ahead. And with that is a segue for Dr. Cito to come forward and talk about really a systems approach and taking a deeper dive into the work. Dr. Cito?
Good evening, Dr. Smith, School Board Chair Samuels, and fellow school board members. This evening, I will share with you the systems approach Hampton City Schools is taking to support early literacy. This presentation includes information regarding English Language Arts Handbook, response to intervention, including the RTI database and programs, curriculum and resources update, and a professional development learning update for administration, teachers, and early literacy support staff. As I started in my new role, I met with stakeholders, including the English Language Arts teacher specialist, administration, literacy support staff, and teachers, to hear what they felt was most important for students to become strong readers, writers, and communicators. Through these conversations, the English Language Arts Department came up with our core beliefs around literacy. This information has been shared with stakeholders and is in the English Language Arts Handbook. Our English Language Arts approach is based upon a balanced literacy model. In a balanced approach to literacy instructions, teachers integrate instruction with authentic reading and writing experiences so that students learn how to use literacy strategies and skills and have the opportunities to apply what they are learning. The components on this slide are necessary for students to become great readers, writers, and communicators. To support a common understanding and a systems approach to English Language Arts, the ELA department has created definitions, documents, and videos with teachers and other stakeholders. This slide depicts 2 examples of our balanced literacy charts that are provided in the English Language Arts Handbook. You have copies of the full documents in your packet. The English Language Arts team has clearly defined what each component is, the purpose of each component, and how often it is expected to occur. This helps to ensure all 21 elementary schools understand what is expected and are providing students with the best learning experiences in English Language Arts daily. Furthermore, the English Language Arts Department provides schools with monitoring documents so that students' reading data is driving instruction. In your packet, you have the complete progress monitoring document, which shows by grade level, by month, the expectation for monitoring students' reading. This was provided to staff last year, but we increased the frequency for our learners. We have to ensure that students are moving at the appropriate pace if we are going to meet our goal of 95% of third grade students reading on grade level by 2020. We can only do this through frequent, systematic monitoring of reading progress. Our department also created a tiering document to help schools identify which students are above, on, or below grade level in reading. This document helps schools identify which students need Tier 2 or Tier 3 supports and which students need enrichment. This information, along with the progress monitoring data, are entered into the RTI database. Schools had access to this document in the past, but the running record and comprehension assessment expectations were added to the document this year. Schools have been guided to use this document collaboratively during grade level collaboration so that teachers can have rich discussions to make the best decisions regarding student need and instruction. These are the data points schools are currently using to ensure our students are receiving appropriate instruction in reading. The first 3 assessments listed are universal screeners. Universal screening is the first step in identifying the students who are at risk for learning difficulties. It is the mechanism for targeting students who struggle to learn when provided scientific, evidence-based general instruction. Universal screening is typically conducted 3 times per school year in the fall, winter, and spring. Universal screening consists of assessments focused on targeted skills, for example, phonological awareness, vocabulary, and comprehension. These are highly predictive of future outcomes. A running record is a tool that helps teachers to identify patterns in reading behaviors and are given more frequently. These patterns allow teachers to see the strategies that students uses to make meaning of individual word and text as a whole. In Hampton City Schools, we use running records to provide the consistency we need between the universal screeners and early literacy to move students forward as readers and writers at the appropriate pace. This slide is a snapshot of the Kindergarten PAL screening tool and what it measures. In your packet, you have the entire document. This assessment focuses on fundamental and foundational literacy skills to ensure students become strong readers in areas such as phonological awareness, concept of letter, concept of word, and letter sounds. Furthermore, PALS assesses all students in grades 1 through 3 using the entry-level components in spelling and word recognition. This assessment also includes oral reading and context to measure the progression of reading skills expected for students beyond kindergarten, such as fluency and comprehension. Furthermore, if students' scores indicate they are still lacking in the foundational skills in grades 1 through 3, students will be assessed on alphabet recognition, letter sounds, and concept of word. This will help teachers pinpoint instruction for students. Students in grades 1 through 3 can also be assessed in phonemic awareness if, once again, the scores show that there is an indicated need for that student. It provides teachers with the needed information to provide appropriate and specific instruction for students. This helps to ensure we address all early reading needs prior to the student leaving 3rd grade. We also use the Diagnostic Reading Assessment, or DRA2, which also gives us the student's DRA level. For example, a DRA 16, which you see there for 1st grade in the end of the year level, encompasses the student's ability to read fluently by noting the words per minute, the accuracy of the student, what are the errors the student's making, and are they also self-correcting? And it also gives us comprehension in the form of a retell or answering questions about the text they just read. This chart was given to all schools to help them see the movement that is expected for students in each of the grade levels. This chart depicts the importance of the modifications to the progress monitoring document to include monthly monitoring of reading. For example, a 1st grade student is expected to move 8 DRA levels from the beginning of 1st grade to the end of 1st grade. So if you look at 1st grade, you see they go from an instructional 4 to a 14 to an 18. It goes 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So you can see that that is consistent movement that is almost monthly. Therefore, it's very important for us to monitor the students monthly in their reading instruction to make sure that they're moving at the appropriate pace. Furthermore, second grade, it helps also with acceleration. So for example, if a second grade student starts second grade at a DRA 14, which is a mid-level first grade, a teacher and an administrator can quickly see that that student needs to move by a year and 3 months to be on grade level by the end of second grade to go into third grade. So the document really helped our schools look at the expectations of growth by year and also what they needed to do to accelerate students as readers. Finally, this chart shows the importance of grades 1 and 2 for meeting the division goal of 95% of third grade students reading on grade level in 2020. Between these two grade levels, students move 14 levels, which correlates to moving from two sentences per page in a book to full chapter books with text filling up the page. So it is a huge growth during that time frame for our early readers. This slide is a snapshot of the universal screener called the Reading Inventory, or RI. Students start taking this assessment in grade 3, which helps the teacher to know what level book a student can comprehend. So this assessment focuses mainly on comprehension and inferencing. The students receive a Lexile score, which is students' expected Lexile growth for the year, and the growth needed to reach proficiency, which means that child would be on grade level. The green tab shows the grade level, and the blue highlighted tab shows the RI information. The information below the yellow line is the range or score for the students. So you can see here that the teacher can see for this particular student that they started at a Lexile 275, which is below grade level, and the student expected Lexile growth is anywhere between 190 and 245. If they reach the goal of 245 Lexiles, that student will be an on-grade reader by the end of the year. You can see by this snapshot that this child has already taken the winter RI, reading inventory, and they have surpassed that already at a 618 Lexile. So this information as the universal screener helps us to see how the student is progressing in terms of comprehension. As I shared earlier, we utilize running records to ensure that we have the frequency between the universal screeners to ensure that our students are moving at the appropriate pace to ensure they are reading on grade level. This is a snapshot of the RTI database tab for running records, and you can see this slide. An administrator and a teacher can sit down with this and look and see, wow, okay, this student has moved from a DRA 18, and then by the time they were in December, they're moving forward to a 24 to a 28. So this student is moving at the appropriate pace, and actually will be, if they continue as a second grader, will be above grade level by the end of the year if they continue this progress. So now I'm going to move on to the resources update. To support whole group reading instruction, the division has purchased benchmark literacy over a 5-year period and rewrote each grade level's curriculum when the resource was purchased. This year, the process has been completed with kindergarten receiving benchmark literacy. Furthermore, to support the foundational skills needed for readers and writers in kindergarten, the division implemented the phonics kit to ensure teachers have the materials needed for letter sounds, phonemic awareness, and concept of word. And as you heard earlier through the PALS assessment, those are core components we need our kindergartners leaving kindergarten having so that they're ready for first grade. Currently, the curriculum is being rewritten to include benchmark literacy and the phonics kit. Quarters 1 and 2 are complete, and quarter 3 will be completed by the end of next week. There also has been a focus on read aloud and small group reading instruction this year. The CIA headquarters, benchmark literacy, level book rooms, and classroom libraries schools have what they need to have a balanced approach and a literacy-rich environment in their classrooms. A classroom library is needed for student reading development. It is a collection of a wide variety of books that span a significant range of difficulty levels, topics, genres, and perspectives, and is located in the classroom. Students need books that reflect the diverse, multicultural nature of our society, books where they can learn about themselves and others. Children learn to read by reading. They can learn, the teachers can promote children's involvement with reading by having them interact with the books in their extensive classroom libraries. This year, our department has conducted a classroom library survey to ensure we know what books our schools currently have in their classrooms and what the needs are. That includes ebooks. In collaboration with Title I and the executive leadership team, the ELA English Language Arts Department has also provided administration literacy staff with the Jan Richardson book, The Next Step Forward in Guided Reading. This book is being used for a series of PD so that administration can build the capacity of their teachers in small group reading instruction. So that leads nicely into our professional development. This year, administration, literacy leaders, and teachers have participated in professional development in implementing interactive read aloud and small group reading instruction. Read aloud fosters a love of reading and shows the students the process of reading. It fills the ear with the richness of words and sentence variety, and it introduces text, vocabulary, genres, and authors to children. There are read alouds where you stop and teach into the text, and another that is meant for students to hear how a good reader reads and for enjoyment. Furthermore, Ms. Farringer, our English Language Arts teacher specialist, has conducted professional development series for third grade teachers. This series included read aloud, small group reading, and literacy workstations. Ms. Ingram has provided the first part of her professional development series for grade 1 teachers in word study. She is currently conducting small group reading training and will finalize the training with running records. Based upon data, Ms. Ingram will also provide a small group reading instruction workshop for second grade teachers, because at this time our data is showing that we have 21% of our second graders PALs identified. Also, to ensure all students are reading on grade level, all administrators, literacy leaders, and teachers need to understand how to assess, decide, and implement small group reading instruction. And we are doing an ongoing series of professional development using Jan Richardson's book with all the literacy leaders. The book includes chapters that give teachers, administrators, and literacy leaders a strong understanding of the different stages of literacy. The stages of literacy are assessed using running records, and then instructional decisions are made, and then we continue to measure that progress. We have created resources such as Look For documents to help administration have what they need to give purposeful and specific feedback to help teachers become stronger teachers of reading, which will help our students become stronger and on-grade level readers. So far this year, we have held 3 PD sessions. We are also creating a professional development library, and this library is going to include all of the balanced literacy components, so read aloud, small group reading instruction, shared reading, independent reading, workstations, those types of things. So we're building that in collaboration with other departments. So far, we have videotaped Ms. Farringer working with the third grade teachers, a small group read aloud, and workstations. Ms. Ingram will be videotaped coming up with her small group instruction and running records. We have also videotaped teachers around the division showing best practices and read aloud, using benchmark literacy, using the CIA headquarters effectively. So we're building that over time. That'll be a continued professional development library, and what will take place is it will be housed on a Google site where teachers will have easy access to that Google site, and it'll allow them, even if they're new to the division, if they need to see quickly what is a running record in Hampton City schools, what is expected for read aloud. They don't have to wait several months before a PD offering or something along those lines. They could get it right then and there by watching the video. And last but not least, Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. To support all students reading on grade level, we are also providing Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. Each school has at least one early reading interventionist to support students that are PALS identified and not reading on grade level. The early reading interventionists are either using early literacy intervention kits provided by Ms. Ingram. These kits are organized by stages of literacy, emergent, beginning, and transitional, or the SIPS program. The SIPS program focuses on foundational skills such as phonological awareness, phonics, and sight words. All these foundational skills support fluency, accuracy, and comprehension. These supports will help accelerate our students so they move from below grade level readers to on grade level readers by the end of 3rd grade. Furthermore, the ELA department has collaborated with the special education department to provide small group reading instruction to our students with disabilities. Special education teachers participated in small group reading instruction, running records professional development, and recipe for reading professional development, which is based on the Orton-Gillingham approach, which is also focused on phonemic awareness, sight words, and alphabet recognition. So we're really working on that systems approach to ensure all of our kids are getting what they need. Therefore, to ensure all of our students are career, college, and life ready, they must be able to read. Dr. William Daggett's research clearly shows we are no longer in a time where we can say they can go into the military or just send them to the workforce. This graph shows that college textbooks, military training manuals, and entry-level jobs expect students to read at or above a 1200 Lexile. That is between an 11th and 12th grade level. Therefore, an early literacy focus is important to ensure all students are reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, so that our students maintain or accelerate as readers so that we can meet all of our goals for 2020. With a literacy focus at all levels, we will meet our goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cito. Again, I'd like to thank you for your leadership as well as the work of Ms. Ingram and Ms. Faringer in language arts. I'd also like to recognize both Dr. Haynes and Dr. Owens for their work and really expectations of principals. They are supporting us through professional learning. There's a lot of competition for principals' times, and this year through ongoing monthly meetings and trainings for assistant principals and principals. And lost my train of thought there in reference to. Let me just stop right there. Are there any questions at this time? We'd be happy to address any questions at this time, whether that's from Smart
It's
Beginnings.
called overload, Dr. Casiano.
Snow load, snow.
Are there any questions, remarks from board members? Ms. Henry?
Yeah, there's a lot of information packed into this report, and it's all very, very important. I wanted to first thank Mr. Myers and his group for coming and for all their work. And it's interesting looking at this because I was with Dr. Caggiano when we had our first Hampton Village kind of meeting, which you all participated in, as well as Healthy Families. And when we had a number of the private providers, we thought they would be asking us questions about educational issues. And in fact, what their concerns were that how do we help teach social emotional skills? Because those are so critical to being able to acquire the other skills. And so it's interesting that you have formatted this in this way, that parents need to be aware that there are a lot of other things besides learning your ABCs, that just talking to your child and building that vocabulary, but the ability to actually have a conversation and have correct social interaction with the people around them is so critical. So thanks for all of you who put in the work on this. This is a very helpful document for parents. Reading is an interesting thing. I think we have for years tended to say if you're an early reader, you must be gifted, and if you're a late reader, you must be have some kind of learning disability or not be very smart. And neither of those is the case. And it was interesting to me that while we're trying to chart our goals for children in a very structured, incremental way, that the first record you showed us showed a child make a big leap. And that's so often the case, that kids struggle, and then there's aha, and it's easy now from now on. And I've seen that with people in my own family that, some learned to read from the cradle and some learned to read in the 4th grade. It just, and they were all equally smart. They just took it in differently. And so I think the tiered approach is very, very important for us, because that's saying, we don't think you're stupid. We just need to help you right now because this isn't clicking for you. And if we can get those supports in the earlier we can, the earlier they get to have the aha moment and not feel like they're struggling. And I think all children need to have a lot of the general supports we're building in, like the reading aloud and learning to discuss the ideas and things, and not just think that I'm going to get that automatically by sitting with a box of books. It's not, unless we interact with the children, they're not going to get those skills. So it's a very, very interesting report. With regard to the last chart about the literacy level of materials we teach, that I think as we're going to academies, obviously we need to consider other kinds of choices for reading material in high school so that we expose kids to things of a higher reading difficulty and of different kinds of materials like technical manuals and technical materials and all that kind of thing. So I know the NAEP test and those things have always used different kinds of materials other than a story. And some children react to literature and the things way we classically think of it, and others would be more excited about some more interesting nonfiction. And I think elementary readers were faster in putting in nonfiction materials in elementary school than high school literature packages tend to be more the things we all do. We teach the saber-tooth curriculum. We keep teaching what we were taught, and that maybe isn't the thing to be doing. But very interesting report. Thank you all. And the staff development piece is so important. I think it's really especially terrific that you have tapes of peers delivering a lesson. It's so much more impressive to see your peer doing the strategy than to have any expert or the book or the step-by-step or somebody with a PowerPoint telling you what you're supposed to do. When you see your peer doing it, you say, oh, I can do that. I know her. She's doing, yeah, I do that too. And it's much more helpful, and I applaud among all the other things you have that are available to teachers online that are a big resource, that having the video of their peers doing something is particularly helpful, I think. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Xavier?
Thank you. I had a comment and a question. I'll start off with the comment. And I see today in the audience my very first principal that I ever had here in Hampton City Schools, Dr. Drew, when I went to Hampton Elementary School as a 3-year-old. I'm glad that we're still focusing on that at Moton, because I can tell you right now that because I went to Moton, everything that's on this checklist, that's what I learned there. And I'm glad that we're continuing to focus on it. And my brother went to Moton, and we're still continuing to focus on these tasks that are on this list here as he attends Booker now in 1st grade. And these are truly important, because I see some of the things up here, and I say, wow, this is amazing, because some of the stuff that my brother learns at school, this is truly what's on this list, and this is really what our students need to be successful in order to meet these ranges that were on the last slide. So I'm glad to see you, Ms. Drew, and I'm glad to see that great things are coming out of Moton, and we're continuing to progress to make sure that our students are prepared for 21st century learning, like we say in the 2020 goals. My question is, if a student is identified as needing the intervention, is there something that parents or the student is sent home with, like that they can do either online or just extra stuff that they can do to make sure that the next time they take that benchmark or they take another test, that they can meet that? Did I take that question from you?
No, I had a similar conversation with Dr. Caggiano several weeks ago.
Oh. Well,
Yes, there were some great ahas from that
Great question,
conversation. One of the things we were talking about during that conversation was with the RTI database, the Response to Intervention database, and the rich data that's in there. And the aha for me was, why do we just keep this to ourselves as educators? That I know we do have some teachers that make it a practice when they have a parent come in for a conference to share that information. But if I'm on the receiving end of that conversation as a parent, I would want you as a teacher to walk me through these data points. So if I come in at the end of November, talk to me about what's been progressing monthly. So, Mr. Samuels, when we left that conversation, it was wheel spinning and how do we provide supports for teachers to have a little bit more in-depth conversations. Not to say that's not happening, but on a more system-wide basis. I don't know anything else that Dr. Cito would like to provide, but a lot of that, Xavier, I would say take in the form of parent conferences and not just face-to-face, but ongoing communication. Anything else you'd like to add that's been highlighted in PD?
That is something that we are working on in the systems approach to ensuring everybody's involved with the child in terms of their reading. So, for example, the reading inventory, the RI, actually has a parent letter that can be sent to parents. So we're just ensuring that that's taking place. And also the PALS information, there is a form letter that can be sent that's more friendly for parents to, understand what that means. And then the other piece that we are working on, though, also is students being able to advocate too and be able to share their information. So we are working on goal setting with the students, that they know what their Lexile means. So we actually show them the Lexile. They see the text. So if it's a 285, they see that. Then they see the 550, which would get them to be on grade level. And then they work through how to, with the teacher, they have co-ownership of that reading. So that is part of what we are currently working on in terms of providing resources in the handbook and professional development.
Thank you. That was my only question, but I truly do like everything that's going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Mugler?
Just a couple of comments. And just since we were just talking about that particular aspect of things, I do think that it's good to hear that we are working at ways to kind of communicate those things to parents and families and students. But so often parents get a document at home about PALS or DRA and a Lexile number, and those are things that people who are not educators by trade, it really is like Chinese. So I think it's important that we do continue to work on ways to communicate it in layman's terms, if you were, and so I'm happy to hear that piece of it. I'm really happy to see that there is so much real thoughtful and diligent work in this area of literacy, and reading has been an Achilles heel for us for some time in Hampton. So I'm really happy to see this approach and very diligent work that's going on here. Also, I can't let this presentation go by without commenting on the Spark Beginnings piece of this. And I kind of came to school board work having jumped off of a board for Downtown Hampton Child Development Center, which really sparked my interest in this work that I'm doing now, but certainly opened my eyes back in those years to how critical and important it is that all these pieces kind of come into play early. And so this document in particular, I think is really terrific to see. And in Hampton, we've had Healthy Families Partnership over the years that's been mailing out pieces that talk about what our children should be doing at age 2 or age 3 or whatever, and it goes on and on. But this really kind of pulls it all together in a way that talks about what it is my child should be able to do to be ready for school, not just what they can and should be able to do when they're 3 years old, but this is really a piece that's about school readiness, and it really drives that point to parents about, oh, well, I need to look at this piece because maybe my young child is not quite ready, so we need to work in this particular area. So this is really a great piece, and I know it was a true collaboration of lots of great professionals coming to the table, but the outcome is really outstanding, so super nice to see that. The ending slide to this presentation is pretty heavy. Y'all could have said the end at the end of this or something, because it's like, woo. But it's very true. I mean, I think it's important for us to know, really what the expectations are at the end of the road. that, you know, there is a high reading level that's expected of young people today when they leave school and enter into the workforce, and so it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that they can get to that place. So thank you so much for the presentation. I did ask some preliminary questions before coming in, and I really appreciate that feedback back on that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Mugler. Also, I would like to recognize Shaniqua Hayden. She's not here today, a member of Hampton Healthy Families. She also was around the table at Smart Beginnings to participate in the process as well. And in reference to supporting parents and putting things in layman's terms, some conversations in reference to expanding the video library. And so the video library, when we look at teacher recruitment and training for induction for new teachers coming on board, we think that'll be a positive there. But from a parent standpoint, having a teacher walk through a PALS summary report. And so a parent would be able to pause and rewind and again, just another resource from a communication standpoint.
Super.
Mr. Kilgore?
Just real quick, great presentation, thank you. You mentioned the data from 2015, 2016, where 1,288 folks provided information. We had 21% that did not have a pre-K experience or were in a pre-K program. So this past summer was our first year where we actually targeted trying to reduce that number, correct? So can you speak a little bit to how much participation we had and what we might project the percentage of students that have no pre-K experience would be?
Sure, and that 21%, again, going back to opening comments, when roughly 1,400 students registered and 1,288 we had data on, and then so that 21%, just that slice of the pie represents the no. Successful program last year, looking for ways to expand it. It's always great to be able to do that if you don't have to expend too much as far as additional dollars, and I think we were able to do that this summer. One of the things we're doing right now is in that response to intervention database, we have a field in there. So those roughly 60 students who participated in that program this summer were able to kind of track progress, and so we're able to see what they came in entry-wise with foundational literacy skills, and where they'll be at the end of the year, mid-year, end of the year as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Woodhouse, have any comments or questions for Dr. Caggiano?
Well, all of
As a former elementary educator?
Really,
but it was a wonderful presentation. It has always been my concern about our kindergarten students to be able to at least pronunciate the alphabets correctly and to, by the end of the year, be able to read. So I think we're on the right track as far as accomplishing that. One of the questions that I probably would ask is, at the end of the year, what percentage do we have of our kindergarten students that are able to read proficiently and understand what they've read?
Dr. Cedar, do you want to address the last part of the packet there?
Sure. So in your, sorry, here I come. In your packet, the very last page has data from our PALS Division History percentage of identified students. And currently, this fall, we have 11% of our kindergarten students identified for PALS.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of last year, of that kindergarten group, there were 9% percentage of the students that were identified at the end of last year, which was a decrease from the fall. But for us, for this spring, I have spoken to Ms. Ingram and the supports that we're putting in place. We've set our goal for spring 2018 for it to only be 6% of our kindergartners being PALS identified at the end of the year. So we have seen in kindergarten through over the 3-year data that we've had a decrease, but only having that small decrease last year, we had to put some focus in kindergarten, and that's why we also implemented the phonics kits, because the phonics kits focus on phonemic awareness, alphabet recognition, and concept of word, which will help our students be more successful on the PALS assessment at the end of kindergarten. So with that focus, we should be able to meet this goal for our kids.
Do we also look at them at the midpoint of the year, somewhat like right now, and then compare that to where they were at the beginning, and then also at the ending of the school year?
Yes, I actually said to Dr. Caggiano, I wish this meeting was in February because the students are getting ready to take their mid-year PALS. And so then we would have the updated information regarding the progress and where our students currently stand at this time in terms of early literacy. So yes, we will definitely look at that as soon as those results come in. We get the results, and then we work with the administration at the schools to make sure that they understand what that means for their kids, and then we help them with the instructional processes.
Okay, well, as a former kindergarten teacher and first grade teacher, I'm elated about the progress and the direction in which we're going. Wonderful presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, well, Dr. Caggiano, thank you so much for that presentation with your team and also members from all the members that are working on this initiative. As we know, it takes a village to raise a child, and this is a village approach. And as Dr. Smith often said, it's a system approach. And so that is so important. But I would like, before you sit down, I like the fact that when we're looking at our children reading and we're exploring what our children are interested in, is to make sure that we provide them with books that they can see themselves in, and books that they're interested in. And the reason why I'm saying that, I'm using my son as an example, who attends Hunter B. Andrews Pre-K 8. And James does not like to read. However, we recently purchased 2 books for him, Dog Man, which has over 100 pages, and Pokemon, which has also over 200 pages. And James read those books within one night, because guess what? He's interested in Dogman and Pokemon. And so the reason I'm saying that, because I like the fact that we're exploring what our children and our students likes to read. So we need to do that. We need to ask them, what are your interests? What do you like to read? So I would like for you and Dr. Cito, when you're within the school speaking to our student and teacher, is to ask that question: what do you like to read? And once again, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Samuels.
Thank you, Dr. Caggiano and members of the team. At this time, we'll move to the next presentation, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and that's implementing and sustaining a positive climate and culture. And Dr. Cooper, along with Ms. Heather Peterson, will share information regarding our process and where we are, the current reality, and our desired outcomes in this area. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Samuels, members of the board, Dr. Smith. I am very pleased to be here tonight with Heather Peterson to give you an update on our work in this area. I'll start us off with a brief history as to what's brought us to this point, and then Heather will bring us home. So we've split the presentation. As you know, climate is not something new, not a new focus in Hampton City Schools at all. We were one of the earliest divisions to begin to seek feedback from the adults who worked from us, first leaders, then teachers, in the 1990s about what the work experience was like and how we could better support them. We began in the early 2000s to solicit feedback from young people on their experiences at school. The strategic plan since 2010 has actually had a safe and nurturing learning environment as part of our strategic focus. And you know that behavior often drives so much of how people feel about how the school day went. We began positive behavior intervention and support really in around 2005, and then looked to launch it division-wide 2007 and on. And this is a good time for me to acknowledge the work of Katie Barbosa, who was our most recent PBIS coordinator, and some of the work that you're going to see here tonight, she helped lead and put together before taking a post at Bryan Elementary School. What we did have was a lot of things that moved us forward. If you looked at the data over this time and you looked at total offenses, behavior offenses, if you looked at category 1 and 2 offenses, you will see a general decline and then a plateau. So all of these things took us forward, but we did not have a systems approach to building a positive climate and culture. And we recognized that we were at a point where we were plateauing and we needed to do something different. And Dr. Smith convened a team, the superintendent's task force, and this was made up of Hampton City Schools, leaders and employees. We had city agency partners. Police department was there with us, Youth Violence Prevention Office, Department of Human Services. Other partner agencies, private providers, community members joined us for this, and they worked pretty much the entire 16-17 school year. And we had 4 jobs. One was to agree on a definition, just like I heard about early literacy. We all had to agree what kindergarten readiness looked like. We all had to agree on what safe and nurturing looks like. Then look at our division data and focus on identify what we most needed to focus on first, then set some targets. How are we going to measure progress? And identify the strategies that we would use in a tiered system of support, just as we do with instruction. So the definition took us about 5 hours worth of work over 2 meetings. And we had everybody tell us, in a perfect world, what would your safe and nurturing environment have? And so we took all of that and we said, what goes together, what falls together into a category, what's top priority, and through an iterative process, we came up with a beautiful definition, which you can see on our website before we leave here tonight. But what I really want you to come away with is that it has 3 primary elements, and the first one is physical safety. We all have to feel physically safe before we can really concentrate on anything else. The next one is emotional safety. I need to feel like I'm valued. I need to feel like it's safe to take risks. I need to feel like it's safe to fail, and I'm not going to get laughed at or made fun of, so that emotional safety piece. And then an environment for teaching and learning where there are minimal disruptions. Some of us wanted free from disruption, but we remember we deal with 20,000 young people every day, so minimal disruption seemed a more reasonable goal for us. The next thing we did after getting these 3 major areas is take a look at all of the division data and measures we had. And you know we collect a lot of data. And so we looked at what data we had and selected focus areas and then measures for each of those things, as well as setting targets for the next 3 years. So by 2020, what we're looking to see is for physical safety, we're looking at acts of aggression. How many threats do we have? How many students do we get into a physical altercation with one another? And we're looking for a 30% reduction, 10% a year, as we move toward 2020. For the emotional safety, really the measures we have for that come from our climate survey, so both young people and adults. And you see a variable increase there because we have different percentages for different indicators based on where we are now. So the indicators we're using is what percentage of our young people say the adults at my school are caring and supportive. We want that to go up. How many young people agree with the statement that students at the school are treated fairly regardless of how they look, what their religion is, all of those different kinds of things that we could base judgments on, and they're not really talking about how adults treat them, they're talking about how other students treat them. So that's a measure of relationships from student to student. And then the third one is how comfortable are our adults in the work environment and fair treatment. And then the last one, a classroom free from disruption or with minimal disruptions, we are looking to take our count of disruptions in the classroom down by 50% over the next 3 years. So 10%, then it goes up to 35%, and then it goes to 50% by 2020. Then, having said all that, the next job was to come up with what strategies are we going to use to get us there. Again, this was an iterative process where we did some research, we looked at what was out there, we generated ideas, we looked at the impact of every suggestion that we had, what impact would it had, and what feasibility, how difficult would it be to put in place. And so based on an impact versus feasibility study and looking at the research as what's been tried in other areas with populations similar to ours, what do we need to do? And we had a list probably between 60 and 100 items. Well, we all know that running a school with young people, the focus has to be on teaching and learning and curriculum. And so the next work was to boil that down to the top priorities that we thought that we needed to introduce right away. And here's where you see this. We have, again, 3 tiers, as any pyramid of interventions, where the universal measures are the green, and they'll work for 80 to 85% of the population. Tier 2 supports are for young people who need something more, or adults who need something more, and that's usually 10% of your population, 5 to 10. And then that little tip at the top is typically 5 to 7% of your population that really needs more intensive individual support. And so I'm going to run you through these, but I'm going to work backwards. We're going to work from the top down. The Tier 3 supports that we're introducing are informal or less formal behavior assessments available for all students and the ability to collaboratively come up with intervention plans. For students who have disabilities that cause behavior issues, we do a formal process where we figure out what are the triggers, what's going on before the behavior, what are the environmental factors. And so what we're looking to do here is a less formal process that we could use with all students who had significant behavior challenges to say, here are the things that you could do as a school administrator to look for triggers in the environment or stimulus in the environment or what's going on. And then here are the things that you could do to bring that stimulus down, to bring those triggers back. In other words, control the environment in order to minimize the behavior. The next piece is referral for additional services. We've been doing this for years. What we haven't done in a good while is a gap analysis to say, what of our young people need some referrals to outside help or help at a higher level within our organization, and they're not getting access to that help. And right now we have a group of agency leads and private providers that are coming to bear and looking at some of the behaviors that we have and what challenges we're trying to meet and what resources we have available. So right now we are designing a process and a way for our building administrators to identify and then access resources for young people who need extra support who don't currently have it, meaning they don't qualify for the services that are provided by Community Services Board during the day, therapeutic day treatment services, may not have insurance to do counseling outside the home, that sort of thing. So we're doing a gap analysis now, and by second semester, we'll have a process and a list of resources to be able to connect young people and families with the resources that they need. And the third piece is a change in placement. We have that now in an alternative setting, but also this team of people is looking at models that we could do within a school building, perhaps on a temporary basis, to change a placement, to increase the structure that often helps a young person be successful, and then reduce the number of interactions that young person has to go through in any 1 hour, because often for young people that are distracted, that is a trigger for behavior. So those are the 3 that we're looking at Tier 3. Tier 2 supports, we've already begun a lot of this. So I'll run through these a little more quickly. The reflection and redirection tools and processes, those are tools, and they're not yet published. This is a work in process, so that if my teacher has told me 3 times that I need to do something, there is a way for me to go through a process where I look at my own behavior as a young person and refocus my own behavior. There are ways that we can do this with young people with less disruption to the instructional environment, and we will be publishing those and training our teaching staff in how to use those in the second semester. This was not something we planned to roll out first semester. Reteaching and practicing behavior in context. Our elementary teachers do this all of the time. Our secondary teachers, we need to work on curriculum for them so that they are more comfortable doing so. The mentorships and check-in, check-out processes. These have been going on and very successful in our division for a number of years. Any one of our administrators can probably tell you how many young people they have check in with them every morning, or how many building mentors they have that just make contact with a young person in the morning to see how they're doing. And sometimes it's throughout the day, because sometimes just that adult contact to let me share my frustrations or my worries or something that happened to me last night is enough to head off behavior that could happen if I didn't have that outlet. Then the teaching alternative behaviors and restorative practices, those are 2 things that our professional school counselors are working with young people on even as we speak. Well, no, young people are home today, so it wouldn't be right now. But our folks, we often tell young people that if somebody says something negative to them, just ignore it. If somebody's poking at them, just ignore it. Well, it is a very difficult thing to do. If you have some adrenaline going and you're a 7th grader and somebody said something to you and there's an audience watching, it's sometimes very difficult to just ignore it, although I must acknowledge that we have hundreds and thousands of young people who do that well every day. It is a large challenge for some of our young people. And so the key piece to that is if the behavior that you would engage in to go back at whoever said something negative to you is going to get you in trouble, what are 3 strategies that you could use? What are 3 behaviors that you could do instead of that? So that if Mrs. Mugler says something mean to me, and I know that it would probably be bad to give her a retort right here, maybe my counselor would help me figure out that I could write down why I thought Mrs. Mugler had said something unfair to me, and that maybe the next day after we cooled down, Mrs. Mugler and I could have a productive conversation about that. Just a simple example of teaching young people strategies to keep themselves out of trouble. And our counselors are leading that with individual students and with small groups, and also leading restorative practices. And I won't talk a great deal about it, but this is helping young people to realize the consequences of their actions, even if they're minor actions, and to consider themselves what they need to do to make it up to people. So that if they constantly disrupt a teacher's class, understanding what effect that had on learning for the day and where they could do something to wipe the slate clean, apologize to the teacher, a variety of things like that. And so again, these are what we do for the top 3 to 5%, anywhere from 10 to 15% at Tier 2, but the best outcomes you will see when you load up at Tier 1. And so I'd like to ask Heather Peterson to come walk us through our most immediate work this year in Tier 1. And I'll go drive.
Good evening. So as Dr. Cooper mentioned, when we had this brilliant group of people around the table, we came up with tons and tons of strategies. Knowing that Tier 1 is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, we wanted to make sure that we streamlined those, that they were focused, and that when we came to teaching staff, that we were able to say, these are things that are in your direct span of control. So when you look at those top 4 of the 6, that's exactly what we did when we went out to the schools. When you start with appropriate adult supervision. The thing that we hear most often around climate and culture is, how are adults interacting with young people when they might be in their duty stations, when they're welcoming young people in, and making sure, what does that interaction really look like and what are my responsibilities? That other piece up there about explicit teaching of expectations. As Dr. Cooper said, it happens a lot at the elementary level and some at the secondary, but what does that really look like? How do we prepare the time to help young people understand those expectations, and how do they make contributions that when we cross the threshold of the classroom, this is what our expectations are? And recognizing that it's going to look different in different classrooms. Some teachers have a higher tolerance for it can be noisy, it can be loud, you can get up, you can move around. Maybe in a science lab, it's not safe to touch certain materials. So sometimes we don't set young people up to be successful because we take for granted that an 11th grader should know what the expectation is, but different adults also have different expectations. That second piece up there around the consistent use of classroom management basics, that's often what we get called in most times to say is I'm not quite sure how to handle some of these behaviors. When we think about our novice teachers that may be working with different young people than what they student taught, I'm not sure about where these behaviors are coming from. Sometimes is it about the engaging instruction, or is it truly about some of the behavior management components? So we really wanted to provide a lot of resources. We even have veteran teachers who say, in my 20 years, I've never had a group like this. And so being able to give them those resources that they can look at also. And then that one at the very top is the one that we think is the most important when we talk about intentional community building. And we're not just talking about adult to young person, but young person to young person, because that's really what makes a learning community. For the first time in our division, while we've been doing a ton of work around climate, it was said very clearly, climate is equally as important as instruction. Because if you don't have that climate that's conducive to learning, it doesn't matter how great the instruction is if the young people aren't prepared to receive that, because the environment isn't either emotionally safe, physically safe, or if there are so many disruptions. So as a division this time, we went out and pre-service week, and we talked specifically about these Tier 1 strategies, but most importantly, the community building. And the expectation was for the first 9 days of school, every single teacher would do a community building activity with their young people. So that meant at secondary, in every block you did it, at elementary you did it every single day. And we gave them resources, which we're going to share with you later, how we went about that. But it was exciting to be able to provide that as a resource to help teachers and other staff members realize the importance of this, and again, not just what they were going to get out of the community building, but how they can give strategies to young people to be able to build those important relationships. So how do we go about implementing this? You often hear the words climate and culture, and they're used interchangeably. So we knew we wanted to set a clear expectation of where we're going as a division, really helping people understand what our definition is. But we created this ultra complex model that you see up there about what climate and culture is. And when you look at that, culture really is the core. Culture is what our values are based on, it's what our beliefs are based on, and our perceptions. Culture is that heartbeat, if you will, and basically when you boil it down, it's the way we do business around here. It's the way we do business around here. It's what's behind the curtain, really. So really those core values. The climate is the environment that sits in. And the climate on a Monday can look totally different than the climate on a Friday, but when you have that strong culture that's based on values, it can sustain those ups and downs. One thing that we shared with administrators was so funny was you can increase the climate by having jeans and chocolate day, but you really have to walk the talk when you talk about having that strong culture and how we enact our values. So with that, we went back to what are our core values as an organization? And that if we say these are what our beliefs are, how are we creating climates that show these in action? If we say we're about innovation, integrity, professionalism, excellence, and responsibility, what does that look like in action? The other thing that we had to acknowledge is that a lot of our schools over the past several years really focused on developing their own set of values. And we didn't want to throw those out of the window. For instance, Bryan Elementary, it's about customer service, high expectations, and relationships. You can align those to Hampton City Schools values and how we live those out so people understand when you come into the school, this is what you can count on. They're not just words on a poster, but our actions actually speak to that. So really helping all stakeholders in the division understand what our climate and what our culture definition is. So furthermore, how we had to do that was to dig even deeper. And so we started last June with our first summer leadership that we do in June, and really having the conversation for the first time in a while about what really the definition is, and then from a leader's perspective, how do we enact this? Knowing what your climate is, knowing what your priorities are, how do you bring those values to life? How do you create that climate that you want to create? We got to do a follow-up again in August where they really dug into some planning time. It wasn't just us throwing information at them, but it was them taking a look at their individual buildings and saying, what's the priority here? Because we know we can't say all of you should be doing this first, because they all have different personalities, they all have different makeups when we think about those buildings. Then we had the opportunity for teachers. Again, as I said, a very exciting opportunity. 3 of us, Dr. Cooper, Trina Hatcher, and myself, went to every single school during pre-service, and we were given 90 minutes to work with teachers. We were able to talk about what our expectations are. We were able to have a collaborative conversation about what climate and culture is and to unveil what these strategies are. They're so accustomed to hearing the tiers of support from an academic side, so it was a really nice way to come alongside and say, climate is equally as important, and now we've put these interventions in place for that as well. Knowing we wanted to have resources to go along with this. As Dr. Cooper mentioned, we've been a division that's done PBIS, which really focuses on behavior, since 2005. Schools had PBIS teams where they really focused on what are our discipline referrals, what infractions are happening, when are they happening, which is all really important data. But because of our focus, knowing how important climate and culture is, we asked schools to make a shift. We asked them to come out bigger than that and to really create climate teams, where PBIS becomes a tool for some of the work you want to do around climate, but we need to look at other components around that. So starting this year, schools had a climate coach, which shifted from a PBIS coach to a climate coach, and then they went back and they created climate teams. Some really smart administrators just turned their school leadership teams into their climate teams, because they said if our school leadership team is focused on how this building's running, we need to be talking about climate. It doesn't need to be a separate team, but really having schools to be able to focus on this work. We created quarterly tip sheets that go out electronically from the climate support team, and the climate support team is myself, Dr. Cooper, and Carla Mann, who's the Director of Student Support and Counseling. And for instance, one went out right before break about what's your January restart look like. Education is one of the few businesses, if you will, that gets a chance to have a hard restart, create a clean slate. A lot of schools are going to have new young people coming in that aren't going to know what those expectations are. 2 weeks, and now 5 additional days of vacation. They're going to need to know those expectations. And it's a chance for kids to have a brand new start. So to really treat it like welcome to the start of the school year, getting them to think about what does the setup of your room look like? Do you still have All About Me posters up? Are they walking into fall decor? But really, what environment are you trying to create? And more importantly, how are you going to have the two-way conversation with young people around those expectations? The final piece that we're very excited about that we started to develop over the summer is an actual virtual toolkit. So this is an opportunity that staff can tap into 24 hours a day. If you go to the staff page, anybody with an HCS email can access this. Right there, it's the second bullet, Climate and Culture Toolkit. So because this is living and breathing, we try and update our front page often. Again, the January reset tips, they could access those and just reminding them again, what's your new year going to look like as you slide down, and there's interactive pieces they can click on. We even put up a video that's welcoming students back that they could use or they could create their own. We try to go in and put in monthly a new tip, so this one was around classroom management for them to have interactive pieces around, and always standing is the HCS definition of culture and climate. So that's the hallmark version. As Dr. Cooper said, those 3 main components: physical safety, emotional safety, and minimal disruptions. Also at the very bottom, and it's on every page, we put a contact us button. So if teachers have questions, on there it says, do you have a great idea to share? So really trying to make it a living document that we can have connection back with young people. When we introduced this, and again, when we talked about the fact that we wanted that intentional community and relationship building to take place, this was our first foray into really providing resources. We wanted to acknowledge that there's teachers that naturally do this all the time, but with the expectation of it happening the first 2 weeks of school, knowing we'll have some brand new teachers that are a bit overwhelmed, knowing that teachers are trying to plan for a successful instructional start, we wanted to provide some resources for them also. So if you click on that, what we did is we set it out by elementary, high school, and middle school. Dr. Cooper had the opportunity to meet with the teacher advisory team, and the high school teacher said, said, the thing that may prevent us from doing this is I don't want to do an activity that a kid's already done 5 times. So they come to my 4th block and they've already done the same thing. So we created it by departments, and then we went in and we put very different activities so there wouldn't be a high likelihood that kids would have that same experience. The one thing that we really hit on when we did our presentations and worked with teachers at the beginning of the year was this notion of respect. In any conversation that I have with young people around things that are happening when they talk about relationships, whether it's with adults or whether it's with their peers, the word respect comes up. You're not respecting me, she's not respecting me, they're so disrespectful. So we really encouraged and asked at least one of the activities to be around unpacking the standard of respect. So we gave them 10 different ideas that they could use to do that, but really making it a two-way conversation. Be respectful is probably on the wall of almost any school that you walk into. But we often don't take the time to talk with young people about what their definition of respect looks like. And again, how respect can look different in different classrooms. Some teachers' form of respect is that you sit, you're quiet, you're compliant. Some others is that if we're respectful in this classroom, then we have dialogue and we have conversation. But really also getting young people to be comfortable about talking about what respect looks like. And when they think about it, not just in terms of adult to teacher, but they think about what does a respectful environment look like student to student. Also, we have the consistent use of classroom management basics. This is another very, very full area. This is one of the areas, as Dr. Cooper mentioned, that Katie Barbosa spent a lot of time working on, is that she did research around those evidence-based classroom management strategies. And while there is a lot in here, there could be thousands more, and we didn't want to make it so overwhelming. But again, it's very interactive. Along the bottom, you can see those key pieces. We know structure is a hang-up, and if you click on the resource, it takes you to another site that gives you, or another document that gives you those. Some of them are videos, some of them are tip sheets, but again, we wanted to make it very user-friendly. This is good in the fact that administrators have access to this, so they can look at it, they can sit down with the teacher, they can have a conversation. Mentors have access to this, so those that are mentoring new teachers can use this as a tool, and teachers themselves. I'm just struggling here, and I don't even have to tell anybody about it, but I have this resource that I can take a look at. So we wanted to make this obviously research-based, but when we think about a systems approach, that all have access to it around these great strategies. And again, you can drive through this yourselves also with the explicit teaching of expected behaviors. That's an area we're trying to fill with videos of actual HCS teachers with students. For instance, there's an example in there of an elementary teacher doing a small group, literacy group, about how we work in small group and what those expectations are. So you see HCS kids from Cary Elementary having that experience and a teacher very naturally walking through that. So we want to continue to fill that library, if you will. And then with the appropriate adult supervision, just some basic information about what good supervision really looks like.
Okay, and we go back to...
So again, we have we've had an opportunity with our climate teams and our climate coaches. We've had one session of professional development with them where we really had them go into the toolkit and think about ways that they can take this back and use it in their buildings. We're getting ready to have another session in February with our climate coaches where we're really going to be able to get some more information about what's working, what are things that they've put in place with this climate focus. I try to spend the majority of my time in schools, some great application that we've seen so far. We've got schools that are running kindness campaigns, and not just a week, but a year-long campaign on kindness. Because if we could just talk a little more kinder, if we could be more thoughtful about our actions, then what a difference would it make? So very excited to see the results coming from that. We've got a couple of administrators who've taken on doing positive referrals. So they look out to call parents about a positive referral as opposed to that negative referral. We've got middle school that's focusing on growth mindset and does a piece every single morning with young people about not having a fixed mindset and about how you get growth and grit in place. space. So we're definitely starting to see the fruits of the labor where people are understanding. We don't just kick the year off thinking about what climate we have to be intentional about it every single day. And the other thing that's really exciting that we're seeing is that we have schools, we have some grade levels and some individual teachers that are piloting class meetings, which really engages young people to be part of the decision-making process of how do we want our classroom to run. If we're having an issue where people aren't talking nice to one another in the classroom, we use that class meeting every single day to revisit what are strategies we can do around that. How does it make you feel when someone speaks to you this way? And what's something you could do as a replacement or alternative behavior? So, coming full circle, I find it ironic that we're ending with social emotional learning, and New Beginnings talked about the importance of social emotional learning. This is what research says is going to get us the biggest bang for our buck when we think about getting young people college, career, and life ready. These social emotional learning strategies translate into emotional intelligence when we think about it from the business world. And when we think about that true definition, the capacity to identify and manage emotions, resolve problems effectively, and establish healthy relationships. That's something all of us need, not just young people, but adults. So really thinking about how can we focus on this so it becomes the strategy and the toolkit for our young people. So we've started this endeavor. We exposed our administrators to how can you connect this to the classroom. We know how vital instructional time is, bell-to-bell instruction, and it doesn't have to be a stop-drop 45-minute lesson. You can infuse social emotional learning just by simply using certain language with kids. Other examples might be, as we heard tonight, read-alouds. You can do a read-aloud on kindness and be able to ask interactive questions around that while still talking about predicting or visualizing. Other ways this gets done, again, as I mentioned, through class meetings. Something else that was brought up tonight was goal setting. When we think about social emotional, we can help young people to create goals around how can I make more responsible decisions? How can I be more aware of my emotions or control those things? And then thinking about how teachers give young people feedback. Not just feedback about how they're doing academically, but when they have feedback of, Mr. Samuels, I love the effort that you put into that. Because oftentimes we tell kids to try harder and they've already been trying hard. Or nobody's caught them using effort, so they don't know what it feels like or what you mean. So even using that emotional punctuation of, yesterday you used so much effort in that math class and I want to see you use that today. Because then I can remember what that felt like when you caught me using that. So the biggest way that we're doing that is also through our counselors. I have the privilege of monthly co-facilitating the elementary counselor meeting with Carla Mon, and we've been taking every single component of social emotional learning, and the counselors are now going back, using that in their one-on-one small group, and some of them are even facilitating professional development around this with the adults in their buildings. And then tomorrow night, I have an optional session starting with elementary folks around how they can connect this to the classroom. So what we know is that if we can make those more responsible decisions, we can have that emotional awareness, show empathy, it definitely impacts our climate and culture. And this is a great tool that we can give our young people that's not given to them, but it's something that's done collaboratively. So where we're going with next steps, again, we want to continue our work with our climate teams. We think that climate teams are the way for us to build capacity around this throughout the division, that they'll be able to be on-site resources for their schools, helping them to make sure they're looking at the right data, helping them to make sure that they have the right focus area, and then just being a support for teachers who might be struggling with their classroom climate as a whole. The second piece is that focused and differentiated professional development. We know ultimately that safe and nurturing environment helps us to impact teaching and learning, and we want to make sure that we use the PD as a vehicle to include young people in this collaborative process. And then the last piece, of course, is we want that assessment of progress. When we come in February, new climate data will be in. We'll also be able to talk to climate coaches about what's being implemented in the building, what's working, what do we still need to focus on, and where do we need to make adjustments. Because we know that a one-size approach isn't going to work because we have unique climates within all of our buildings. So making sure that we're acknowledging that and how do we make adjustments to support our schools, to support our adults, and to support young people. What questions might you have for us?
Are there any questions or remarks from board members? Mr. Kilgore? Ms. Mugler?
Whatever, we're all pointing at
Ladies
each other.
Ladies first.
But I'll go, and I really don't have any questions. I submitted a few questions, and I think you all talked me through most of those questions, and certainly I know there will be some more conversation about those, kind of what that sounds like, looks like, but you did talk quite a bit about what some of those approaches really sound like and look like. But I'm very encouraged by this presentation. Actually, first off, I'm just going to say that, I'm just going to say it out loud, two of my very favorite presenters in this whole school division. So this was such a pleasant presentation to digest. So I love everyone in the division, but I just have to say I could sit and listen to both of you for hours and hours. But I think very early on in Dr. Smith's tenure here in Hampton, we had a conversation about PBIS in particular, which certainly ties very directly into the climate and culture. And just how important I think we felt as a board that be administered with fidelity, that we really, division-wide, really looked at how we did this, because it is so important to the whole teaching and learning piece if this is not in place and not there. So I'm really happy to hear the intentional work that is going on around climate and culture. One of the particular pieces out of this presentation that I took away was the intentional community building activities. I really, really like that. And one of the reasons that I think that's so critical and important is because I parent young people that are getting older, but and now I'm a grandmother. But you know, so much of what our young people today do is centered around their device, which I don't know whether you all noticed me during this presentation. I was searching for this thing because it was beeping and I couldn't find it in my purse because it was in my coat pocket. But anyway, so much of what young people are connected to is this thing, and there really isn't this community building, community conversation. And so I think that's really a big, really important piece of all this. I love that. So I'm really happy to hear that. And I love hearing the piece about kindness, and really find that that's very, very important part of our conversation with young people. And I also found your talk about social emotional awareness also very, very important to our young people, because I think we've got a lot of young people that have been and are so connected to the internet and what's going on in social media that so much of their social awareness and emotional awareness is tied to all that wacky stuff. So I think it's great that we're going to start having some real intentional dialogue about that and really looking at that with our young people. So thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for kind of filling in the gaps of what my questions were tonight. So
Sure.
Thanks so much.
One thing I neglected to say, just based on what Ms. Mugler said, is that it's very exciting that several schools with the reset option have asked teachers to do 2 more weeks of intentional community building because they felt it was so important as they come back to have that same experience. And then a couple of the schools are then moving forward with class meetings after that. So it's very exciting to hear leaders taking this opportunity and really holding people accountable, but also that teachers are finding value in doing those activities.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Mr. Kilgore?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I did have a question related to the 2020 outcomes and targets. One of the things that you talked about was a 50% reduction in classroom disruptions. So I wanted to ask how you collect that, how that information is collected so that you can see
And
if you...
what we're using for that measure are those that result in an office discipline referral.
Okay.
So it does not account for those where we have very talented teachers who are able to put those things to bed very quickly without losing instructional time.
Right.
These are the office discipline referrals for disruption.
Because, like you said, different adults have different expectations, and so it can be different class to class. The other thing I just wanted to point, because I think it's noteworthy, you said it, and it can't be said enough, that climate is just as important as instruction. I know in running for school board, I had lots of conversations about public education, and there are people out there that get very sensitive when you start talking social and emotional. They think that's their parent responsibility. You're not supposed to do that. But I think those that are in public education know how important it is, so I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Henry?
My friend Sue Edwards, who was the founding principal of Jones Magnet Middle School, used to say that nothing is accomplished without enthusiasm. And I think with the amount of enthusiasm we've seen tonight, this is all going to be accomplished very successfully. I think it's important that you're reminding teachers that very small things make a very, very big difference in setting the climate in their classroom. I know as I visited elementary classrooms, many teachers will say to their children, friends, let's go sit down over here at the, and okay, that's not how my second grade teacher talked to me, but it certainly creates a nice, we're all friends here together. We all know where we're supposed to go sit for story time. Let's go do that. That's a whole different kind of climate. And for a secondary teacher, to try and have a classroom discussion when somebody says, well, that girl said, and we haven't bothered to learn what that girl's name is, that it takes a little time at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the year to make sure that we all know who we are and something about each other so that we can respond to each other instead, well, he said, well, no, that's Xavier who said, and it makes a lot of difference in how I respond to whatever the discussion is. And so we're not asking teachers to do huge things to change the climate, but the small things can make such a huge difference. And so I applaud you for all that, and it's a shame you don't have any enthusiasm for what you do.
Mr. Williams?
Ms. Peters, I love your enthusiasm. Even when you gave the presentation at Hampton for the mentor group, the enthusiasm that you had when you presented, it truly was contagious in the room. And it gave all the students in the room a different outlook on life. So with the presentation that you give, your portion of it, I truly enjoyed it because the thing that it made me think about, you said something about how every student is different. And every student has a different trigger inside of them trying to figure out, everything is different about them and how certain words or certain actions can cause them to do certain things. And I think it's important. You even mentioned about how our administrators in the elementary school level, our teachers are doing the positive referrals. I think we focus so much on the negative referrals that come in about how, we've had this in the 16-17 school year, and we had this, and we want to reduce it. But I like how we're adding now that in this school year, we had this amount of positive referrals in our school year. And even seeing it on Twitter, when Burbank, they're very heavy on doing it. And even Machen, they do it as well. Seeing these administrators post the sheet of paper and the students smiling, that makes them enjoy school. Not a lot of students come with the mentality or mindset that school is for them. And so for these positive incentives to brighten their day and to make them feel that school can truly be for me and it's a place where I truly want to learn and come and hang out with friends to better my education, it's something that I really like to see. And even at the high school level, I tried to figure out why the teachers were adding that in the first 15, 30 minutes of class. And I'm like, why is every teacher doing it? We've never done that before. And now that you made it, you said that it's kind of coming back to memory now that it all had a purpose at the end of it. But even being in the IB program, I emailed my teacher last night and I told her, I said, if Hampton City Schools cancel schools again, we're going to have to meet at Barnes & Noble because I've been out of school too long. But to build that relationship with the teachers and everything, it's truly there. And I'm glad that we're doing it because students are able to go to teachers, administrators, and tell them what's on their mind. I'm struggling in this area, and I truly need your help. And to build that relationship, it truly means a lot. And even some alum from Hampton came back to talk to Principal Davis and tell them about how going to college, everything that you were telling us in school, it truly made a difference. Some of the football players came back, and they said, Principal Davis, when you were telling me to go to class and be on time, it truly made a difference because now being a student at Virginia Tech or James Madison or the University of Virginia, it truly, it set a tone that I have to get my stuff together, because after I walk across the stage, there's going to be none of that anymore. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to see what this will do for our teachers and administration and also our students in school division. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I just have to share this because Mr. Williams said it. I got to witness, actually the second day we were back, I was at Craft, and a teacher came in and said, we've got to call, so-and-so's parent because he's had an amazing day. And I guess this young person doesn't often have amazing days. And so Ms. McCord put it on speakerphone, and she's like, Mrs. So-and-so, we have so-and-so here. Oh no, what did you do? And when the conversation got to be, I'm calling to tell you that he had an amazing day, it was incredible, and the mom was just beside herself. This is so great, I'm so excited because I thought for sure you were calling to tell me something negative, and how his little face just was gonna explode from that expression, and just taking the time, and a teacher to be equally as excited to be able to have that positive experience. So it definitely makes a difference.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was very impressed with the presentation, especially, I call it climate control in the classroom. But I was very impressed with the one-to-one that you were talking about with not only teacher to student, but student to student. And I was waiting to hear something about how that was being addressed. And so with the part about setting goals, I thought that was very impressive and a good way to direct the students into looking at what their behavior is like in the classroom. I usually like to ask questions, but the consequences of behavior was a part that you dealt with, but I think you dealt with it just a little lightly. In the point where you were saying you're teaching how to deal with the problems, and rather than tell the students to ignore it, or you're trying to teach them now how to deal with it in a positive manner, which I thought was a very good way to enhance their confidence in themselves. What is the opposite on the situation where in a one-to-one with the student, if the student is the initiator of negative behavior? Are we dealing with them in a way where we show them what they have done, what the consequences are, and how they could have done it different? What are some of the things that we're working out with those kinds of situations?
So a couple of things I can think of off of the top of my head is that some teachers, when they see that pattern of behavior, will talk to the student one-on-one and then try to set a goal around that. First, to identify if someone's bothering you, or what's the cause of why you're being negative, and especially if it's not just targeted at one student but multiple students. So trying to get to the source. Are you frustrated about something else but you're taking it out on others? To help kids to be able to use their language to try to identify that social emotional, what's that awareness piece. And then some will try to set a goal around that. Some of them will even use the check-in, check-out system. So who's that caring adult that you're most connected with? Ms. Humble does a great job with that at Machen. She's probably got 20 kids that check in and check out with her, and sometimes it's for Starburst, and you'd think they won $1 million. But being very specific on when you check in, what's your goal for the day? What's your plan for getting through the day so that I get to see you at the end of the day and have that positive report? So goal setting and some of the check-in, check-out. Also, sometimes counselors will get involved. Sometimes they're doing some small group work with a couple of kids that might be having those same things to do some of that strategy work, or even one-on-one with a counselor, or some of the ways that I know that it's trying to be handled. And then even taking the restorative practice. I was at a middle school and a young person had taken juice from the cafeteria habitually and finally got caught. And I thought it was handled so well on the fact that they had that young person go talk to the cafeteria manager. First, they tried to identify, do you need something? Are you thirsty? Do you need something? Can you not afford this? But then going to the cafeteria manager, so the cafeteria manager could say, my counts are off and I have to report this to my boss now, and this is how your actions impacted me. And the young person being able to say, what can I do to make this right? writing an apology note and then even writing a note to the cafeteria director to be able to say, this, I know that my actions caused this and I apologize.
Great. And I think that will help a lot with the suspension rate in our school system. You think so?
Yes, that's what we're hoping, that this will be one of the byproducts, not the only byproduct, but definitely not just saying we want to reduce suspensions, but we want to create a climate where we're giving young people a strategy so they can be successful, and therefore we're seeing that reduction.
Okay. I also heard you say something about referrals for additional service from the outside. Have we had to do any of that as far as getting help on the outside for or classroom management for the teachers? Have we had to do that?
We have not. I was, that referral that we're talking about is for the young people.
Okay.
Is that referral for counseling services, referral for services within the school day or outside, intensive counseling at home, those types of things. And we do have resources, lists of resources that we provide to parents, and counselors often handle those meetings in collaboration with the teaching staff. Sometimes, though, you know that if there are a lot of challenges going on in your home, that it's hard to follow up and follow through and get those resources in place. So the work that we're doing is trying to create a process where we can be more active in helping families access those resources for young people.
Is that going to be, or will that be free to the families, or and the school system will have to take the initiative for the expense for that, or is it going to be a free service that we offer?
We're looking to leverage current resources. So there are Comprehensive Services Act funds that are available through partner agencies. And so there are resources out there that we're looking to leverage and help our families access, rather than creating a program to be funded by the school system.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other further comments or remarks from board members? And just to also highlight some of the resources that are available through the community. Dr. Woodhouse, we have, Dr. Cooper mentioned the Comprehensive Services Act through the Department of Human Services, where if a child is identified that may have some behavioral issues, the base worker or the social worker within the school will also work with the Department of Human Services and possibly refer that child to the family assessment planning team for services outside of the school setting. And so those are called wraparound service, not just within the school, but also in the community. So those are some of the resources that are available to family. But before you sit down, Dr. Cooper and Ms. Heather, I really like the check-in and check-out process each morning because it's an opportunity for teachers and administrators to gauge that emotional level of that student. And also it's an opportunity for that student to do a brief self-assessment as to where am I today? Am I at this level? Or am I at this level? So the administrators or teacher perhaps can keep an eye on that student. So I really, really like that, that check-in and check-out process. So thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. Still yours, Doc.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cooper, as well as Ms. Peterson. As you can tell, based upon both of the presentations, a lot of great work going on. When we look at climate and culture, and then certainly with the early literacy, and you have already heard reports in terms of a guaranteed viable curriculum, the Academies of Hampton, along with the portrait of a graduate, and later you will hear information with regards to our 3-year professional development plan, where we have all of these areas connected, and you'll get a chance to see the professional development plan that we have for 3 years. So thank you. At this time, we'll move into the financial report, and we actually have Ms. Lisa Dienhoffer, who will come. She's the Assistant Director of Accounting. So good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Samuels, board members, and Dr. Smith. I'm a little nervous. This is my first time presenting before you guys, but I'm going to
Please
do
don't
my
be.
best. I'm here tonight to present the results of financial operations through November 30th, 2017. Revenues through November 30th total $70.8 million, and expenditures are $82 million. We're right on target for this point in the fiscal year and just slightly below where we were this time last year by about $300,000. Our budget is based on an average daily membership of 19,250. As you guys are probably aware, the fall membership report has been submitted, and we reported 19,069 students enrolled as of September 30th. Based on prior year's trends and projections, we use those numbers to project where we're going to be for March ADM for 2018, and we're projecting 18,985 students, or 265 students fewer than budgeted for FY18. This is going to result in a decreased revenue of about $1.5 million, but the division and the finance department specifically have taken on mitigating procedures. You know, we're doing a lot of monitoring, of course, of our revenues, expenditures, salary projections, contingency accounts and stuff to cover that. I believe in the report that you've been provided, you also have the detailed categorical transfers to and from Category 9 for the month of November. If you have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions or comments from board members? Okay.
You presented before. It was just always about the budget.
I know the whole thing. I don't know. Seems like it's been a while, though.
Well, you did a fantastic job.
have
Thank you, Dr. Woodhouse. Sorry.
I probably should know this, but it escapes me. On the first page where it says appropriated funds balance, we have some funds there. What is that? What are those funds?
That's carry forward from FY17. That's excess of revenues over expenditures that City Council has appropriated and allowed us to use
That's
into
what I
FY18.
thought. Thank
Yes,
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
You had all the right answers. See there?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes superintendent staff reports. Thank you.
Great. Next item as we continue on the agenda is item 4, hearing of any delegations or presentation of any written communications or petition. Ms. Bowers, do we have any?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is item 5, which is item for actions. We have several. Item 5.01, grievance 2017-2004. Item 5.02, grievance 2017-03. Item 5.03, appointment of Kelly Gorel as the FOIA officer. And item 5.04, minutes of the school board meeting of December the 6th, 2017. And item 5.05, certification of the closed session on December the 6th, 2017. Is there a motion for us to take these items separately?
Yes.
Mr. Kilgore?
Mr. Chair, for action item 5.01, I move that the board uphold the recommendation of the hearing officer in the following matter, suspension 2017-02.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Ms. Mugler that we uphold the superintendent's recommendation of grievance 2017-02. Is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Grievance?
It should be grievance 2017-02.
There's
Oh,
a
not
misprint.
Okay, there was a misprint on that. Okay, and so I stand correct on
Grievance.
Okay, great. If there isn't any discussion, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Ms. Henry,
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore,
Aye.
Ms. Mugler,
Aye.
Dr. Woodhouse,
Aye.
Mr. Samuels.
Aye. And Mr. Kilgore, item 5.02.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board uphold the recommendation of the hearing officer in the following matter, grievance 2017-03.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kilgore and seconded by Ms. Henry that we uphold the superintendent's recommendation of grievance 2017-03. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye. Item 5.03, is there a motion to appoint Ms. Kelly Gorel as our new fire officer?
Mr. Chairman, I move for the appointment of Kelly Gorel as our FOIA officer.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Mugler and seconded by Mr. Kilgore that we appoint Ms. Kelly Gorel as the FOIA officer for Hampton City School. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye. So, Ms. Kelly, you're now the FOIA officer for Hampton City Schools. Congratulations.
It's your lucky day.
I was going to say, Ms. Bowers probably very
And you would be working closely with Ms. Jane Hammond and other individuals requesting documentations and certain information from Hampton City Schools. All righty. And the last two items,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we vote on those items together. They represent the minutes of the school board meeting of December 6th and the certification of the closed session of that same date.
Second.
okay, it's been moved by Ms. Henry and seconded by Ms. Mugler that we approve item 5.04, minutes of the school board meeting on December the 6th, 2017. And item 5.05, certification of the certification of the closed session of December the 6th, 2017. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Bowers, please call for the vote.
Dr. Woodhouse?
Aye.
Ms. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Kilgore?
Aye.
Ms. Mugler?
Aye.
Mr. Samuels?
Aye. Next item is item 6, which is information. The next work session will be held on January the 24th, 2018. I'm saying 2018. I can't believe it. At 6:30 p.m. at Rupert Sargent Building, 1 Franklin Street. And the next regular meeting will be held on February the 7th, 2018 at Jones Magnet Middle School. Dr. Smith, is there any information that you would like to share?
Other than, Mr. Chairman, we're delighted to welcome back all of our young people and staff members on tomorrow. We'll have a full regular day, and so we're excited about that. And I want to say, Superintendent, that how pleased I am with the hard work of so many members of the team who worked in a very diligent way to prepare us in terms of being ready for tomorrow for a full day. So again, and also to the city and the staff there with the city manager and her team and all of the work that was involved to get us to this particular point. So we are excited about welcoming all of our young people back on tomorrow, as well as all of the staff members.
Board members, any closing comments?
I have one comment or piece of information to share. I was honored to serve on Governor-elect Northam's Transition Policy Council on Pre-K through 12 education, and did some work during the month of December. And as a result of that work, there's this lovely document that has been prepared by the council. I made copies and we'll share them with each of you all tonight before we go. But just we'll share that there were some key issues that this transition group did focus on: equity and opportunity for every student, standards, licensing and qualifications for pre-K through 12 educators, a state comprehensive plan implementation, a profile of a Virginia graduate continues to be a discussion item. and college and workforce readiness, preparing students for pathways after graduation, and early childhood education. I personally served on the groups that had discussions on early childhood education and also teacher preparation, recruitment and retention, which centered much of the discussion around the teacher shortage that exists in Virginia. But the document kind of goes through and kind of shares with the governor's team what our recommendations are for how he starts out his term and kind of his midterm approach and those kinds of things. So I'll share the document with you all tonight, and I think you'll find it very interesting. It certainly centers around much of the work that we've already talked about, but so this document was passed on to the governor, who will be inaugurated this weekend. So kind of exciting work to have been a part of, about 75 people from across Virginia to have this discussion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And is any other remarks? And Ms. Mugler, it's such a great privilege for a member of the Hampton School Board to really participate in the governor's transition team and be able to have that connection with the governor in the event that we have any concerns or issue here in Hampton. We have a direct line to the governor. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do so. But before we close, recent public hearing regarding the renaming of schools. Hampton School Board recently held public hearings on the topic of renaming two Hampton City schools, the campus at Lee and Jefferson Davis Middle School. On behalf of the school board, I wish to once again thank community members, students, and citizens of Hampton for their comments at each of the hearings. The school board is now involved in the process and processing the comments and information received during the hearing. The request brought pursuant to school board policy FFA, naming new facilities or renaming existing facilities, continue to be under consideration by the board. The board is carefully weighing the input from the community of Hampton, the citizens of Hampton, determine what is in the best interest of our community. At this time, the board aims to include a discussion of the next steps regarding the renaming request at its deliberation agenda on January the 24th. So thank you, and meeting adjourned.